Hello, everyone. I am recording Daf because I'm going to be away on Saturday night, Motzaei Shabbat, when we are learning Bava Kamma Daf Ayin Tet. Today's Daf is 79. This is Shabbat's Daf. And I don't know exactly where we're up to, so I'm going to start a little bit early just because it's so early, essentially. But we will start on Daf Ayin Chet Amud Bet. And I'm going to start, I'm going to start the last two dots, Bayir of Papa. So if you recall, we said in our Gemara, we had a whole discussion about when a animal is stolen and then sold, whether you have to pay arba v'chamisha if it's not the whole animal, right? So the Gemara now, two dots at the bottom of Ayin Chet Amabet, lost the place. It says Bayir of Papa. So 3 lines from the bottom. Boy Rav Papa. Rav Papa asked the following question. Ganva, you steal an animal. Kat'a umachra, you cut off one part of the animal, and then you sell everything that's left behind. Mahu, is that considered to be selling the whole animal? Mi amrin, do you say madikanav hala zavin? What you stole has not been completely sold because you cut off a limb and you only sold the remaining. Odilma, what you sold, madizavin halo shayer. You didn't sell part of it, you sold everything left, which was a requirement. Teiko, we don't have a resolution of that. How about Tanu Rabbanan, now the bottom line, Ganav, you steal an animal, v'natan la'acher, you hand it to someone else with tavach, and they slaughter it. Or Ganav v'natan la'acher u'machar, and they sell it. Or, turn the Ayin Tet Amud Bet, Amud Aleph, top of the page, Ganav v'hiktish, you steal something, you don't sell it, but you make it hektish, which is essentially transferring it to another reshut. Or Ganav v'hikif, or you steal something and you borrow money based on it. So you exchange it for a loan. Ganav hichlif, or you steal it and then you transfer it, you exchange it without selling it. Ganav v'natan b'matana, you steal and you give it as a gift. Or ganav v'parach cholvo, you steal something and pay back a loan with what you stole. Ganav para behekefo, or the opposite, you pay back your duty from it. Ganav v'shalach sivlonot bebeit chamav, you steal it and you send it to your fiance who's living at home, so it's not yours. You send it to her as a gift. In all of these cases, even though you didn't technically sell it, right, you exchanged it to another reshut by giving it away, by giving it hektish, by doing all of that. Mishalim tashlumi arba v'chamisha, and if it's a set or a par, you pay 4 or 5. Says Gemara, my kamash balan. Okay, that seems pretty obvious to those of us who sort of know, these halachot. We talked about this before. So what are you adding by all of these cases? My kamashmalan, we are now, where am I? Fourth line. Says Gemara, ask Gemara, we already said that the first case is Ashmina Reisha Ganav Natan La'acher B'Tavach, right? The first part is telling you that even though you stole it and then you gave it to somebody else and they did the tvicha, so they did the prohibited thing. Usually we say, if you ask someone else to do a sin for you, ein shliach l'dvar avera. But here, yesh shliach l'dvar avera. And afagav d'b'chol Torah kol ein shliach l'dvar avera. Even though generally, in every other principle in the Torah, you can't make a messenger to do a sin for you because you say they did it for themselves and they're not beholden to you. Hacha yesh shliach l'dvar avera. Here, almost by definition, there's yesh shliach d'var avera. There has to be a messenger, my taima, because the pasuk says utfacho, you slaughter it, umicharo, and you sell it. Now you can slaughter something yourself, but you can't sell it to yourself, right? Ma mechira del efshar delav ayidei acher. You have to have a second party accept it for it to be a sale. Aftvicha ayidei acher. So too, if you slaughtered it through someone else by asking someone else to do it for you, that would be considered to be your act and you're chayav, even though it is a shliach. That's the first part. Bashminan Seifan, the chiddush of the second segment was ganav hikdish, that if you gave it to a hektish, that's also called selling it, because the reason it's called selling it is mali mecharola hadyot, because what's the difference? If you sell it to a person, you get money, or if you give it to hektish, which is selling it, l'shamayim, mali mecharo l'shamayim. So you're chayiv in both of those cases for geneva and mechira. Okay, says the Mishnah now on Daf Ayin Tet Amud Aleph. Let's say The next case, Ganav b'reshut haba'alim. It's a complicated case. We'll see in the Gemara what it means. But you went into someone else's hotel room, that's where I am right now, or in his house, and you stole something from him. V'tavach v'machar chutz mirshutam. And you take it outside of their reshut, and you sell it or slaughter it, which sounds pretty normal. Oh, says the Mishnah, sheganav chutz mirshutam. You stole it from them when it wasn't in their reshut. They were out on the street, and you took it from them, their animal, and you brought it into their house and you slaughtered it or sold it there. Oh, you did everything outside of their house. Obviously, that's you pay the regular rates. Aval, the reason we're quoting the Mishnah is for this part. Aval ganav v'tavach umachar birashutam. If everything was done in their reshut, then you're patur, and we're going to see why in the Gemara. But the simple reason, before we continue, is that you never stole it. Really, you never took it out of their reshut. So because you never took it out of their reshut, you never were koneh. Remember, a ganav has to be kones to acquire something, and since you never left their house, you have to pay because you caused damage. You killed his animal. So you're gonna have to pay him, but you don't, it's not stealing and arba v'chamisha. So you're patur from the extra. Okay. Continues the Mishnah. Well, let's say you're pulling it out of the owner's reshut. Now, mishicha, pulling an animal, is a way to make a kinyan, as we'll discuss. And on your way out, meit b'reshut habalim. It dies before you left his yard. You went into his yard, you took his cow, you're pulling it out, and it died. Patur. Then you didn't take it out of his reshut, so you're patur because you never acquired it from stealing. Higbio, but if you lifted it up, even inside his yard, which would be hard with the cow, but a lot easier with the seh. Oh, hotzio reshut habalim, but you took it actually physically out of his reshut, then you were koneh umeit. If it dies, then you're chayav. Now, what about, continues the Mishnah, nitano libichorot bino. Let's say you give this animal, you steal an animal, and you use it to pay for pidyon haben, bechor bino, right? Your child is turning 30 days, you have to give pidyon haben to a kohen. You don't have any money, so you give this animal that you stole. Or the balchov, you give it someone you owed money to, which is similar to the case what we had before. Or you give it l'shomer chinam. You give it to a shomer chinam, or a shoel, or nosei sachar l'socher. You give it to any of the 4 shomrim, right? Shomer chinam, which is for free, nosei sachar, which is a shomer sachar, shoel is a borrower, socher is a renter. You take this animal, you say it's mine, you might lie about it, or maybe they know it's stolen, and you give it to someone to watch or to borrow from you. In all those cases, hayam moshcho, if you're pulling it along, remember, pulling it as a kinyan only when you leave the reshut. If it's made reshut habalim, if it dies in the owner's possession, then you're patur from arba v'chamisha because you didn't steal it and take it out. Higbio, oshotziyom reshut habalim, if you actually lifted it up or brought it out, umeit chayav. Now, we don't know yet, and we're going to discuss in the Gemara, who is actually, did you give it to the shomer chinam and he's pulling it out of the reshut habalim, or you're pulling it out? We will discuss that in the Gemara. Says the Gemara, boya meimer. Tiknu meshicha b'shomrim olo. Fundamental question, not in relation to our Mishnah. You'll see how our Mishnah seems to be an answer to this question. But if you ask someone to watch something for you, right, and they say, sure, I'll watch it, they have to make a kinyan. They have to do something to acknowledge that, to make that real, right? Just saying, I will watch it for you doesn't make them responsible to watch it for you. So when you say to them, will you watch it for me? They have to make a kinyan to accept the responsibility so that then if something happens to it, they have to pay. So asked Ameimar, is Meshicha a kinyan? What's a kinyan by a shomer? Remember, Hagba'ah, lifting something, is usually a primary kinyan or being in your reshut. What about Meshicha? What about pulling it along? If you pull the animal, is that a siman that you own it, right, for this purpose? Olo or not? Amar Yemar, so I have an answer from our Mishnah. Because if you look at our Mishnah, we talked about a shomer, Tashma. Our Mishnah said, Natna bechorat beno. You give bechorot beno. You give this animal as payment for a bechor for your son. Ola balchover to a debtor, person you owe money to. Or shomer chinam shoel nosei sachar l'socher. You give it to a messenger, a shomer. In all those cases, says the Mishnah, now we're still quoting, hayamoshcho v'yotzei. If they're pulling it and leaving, umeit bershut baalim patur. Right? So it implies that even though you gave it to a shomer and you exchanged the reshut because you gave it to the shomer, but since he only did meshicha and it never left the owner's possession, you're patur. My love, we think the person pulling it is the shomer. And you see from here that although the shomer is koneh, since he never left the reshut, he's patur. Ushmami na tiknu meshicha b'shomrim. You see from the Mishnah that Meshicha is Koneh in a Shomer, because all you're doing in our mission is pulling it, and we are responsible to the Shomer. Amrale, no, it means the Ganav. No, what it means is that, and this is an interesting case, you have to switch it around. Essentially, what it means is not that the robber gave it to a shomer, which is how I explained the case. It's where the real owner gave his cow to a shomer to watch. And then this robber went into the house of the shomer, let's say, or maybe he was watching it in the owner's house, and he started pulling the animal to steal it. So the person pulling it is not the shomer. The shomer got the animal from the owner. He's watching it, or sleeping, but he's supposed to be watching it. And the robber then came in and stole it. So that's referring to the ganav. Somewhere, if it's referring to the ganav, what's the chiddush? Hatana reisha. The first part of the Mishnah already said that if you're stealing and you pull it and it dies before you leave the reshut, you're putter. So why are you telling me again by a shomer? Says the Gemara, well, because we want to tell you this chiddush. Tana, we wanted to teach you both the case of ganav, sheganav mi beit ba'alim, a robber who stole it from the house of the owner, and if you're pulling it and you didn't leave the reshut, you're patur. And we also want to teach ganav, sheganav mi beit shomer. We also want to tell you that the same halacha is true when you're taking it from the beit shomer. You might not have thought that it's the same. And therefore, we wanted to tell you the chiddush in both cases. So therefore, you can't prove this from our Mishnah. Amalei Ravashi. Now Ravashi said, no. Don't, you know what? I don't agree. Lo tidchaya, don't reject that as this. That's not a good explanation. So don't reject the original proof. Right? Rabbi Yemar said we prove from our Mishnah, and we answered Rabbi Yemar and said, no, it's not a good proof because it could be referring to a ganav. Right? Rabbi Yemar said this to a meimar. But says Ravashi, don't push off Rabbi Yemar to Amemar. Don't push off Rabbi Yemar, because that's not a good answer that we need to tell you both stealing from the owner and stealing from a shomer. The shomer stands in for the owner. Mali ganav sheganav mi beit shomer, mali ganav sheganav mi beit baalim. What difference would there be between stealing from the shomer, stealing from the owner? They're filling in for the other person. Elalav, the Mishnah must be referring to shomer, right? And therefore, our Mishnah is telling you, Shma mina tiknu mishicha b'shomrim. Shma mina. In fact, that is a proof from our Mishnah that when you have a shomer, you give over, you steal an animal, you then call up a guy and say, can you watch this animal for me? And that person's bringing the animal out. That's a kinyan. And if they pulled the animal outside of the house, they would be chayiv to pay. The robber, would be chayiv to pay because you gave it over. And killed it, sorry, if it died, right? But because he's still in the reshut of the Baalim, even the shomer makes the robber patur from arba v'chamisha. It's Barnami. In fact, we have a statement saying this from Rebbe Elazar. I'm Rebbe Elazar. Just like they said a halacha, that if you buy something from someone, you can be kona it by pulling it. If I buy a cow from you, I don't have to lift it. I don't have to put it necessarily in my house. Just pulling it is a kinyan. Kach tiknu meshicha b'shomrim. They made the same thing by shomrim. And in fact, there's a braita that says that. Tayinami hachi. It's straight out in a braita, which quote now, just like meshicha. Pulling something is a way to make a kinyan when you buy something. Kach tiknu mishicha b'shomrim. So too, that is how mishicha is a kinyan when you refer to shomrim. If you ask someone to watch something for you and they pull it, they are then taken quote unquote ownership. And if it then gets damaged, they're chayiv to pay the way any shomer would be chayiv to pay. And continues the braita, just like if you buy land, now you can't buy land by pulling it because land by definition is stationary. You can't pull land. But you can be kone karka by either giving money, that's a kinyan, or writing a shtar, or living on it, chazakah. So too says the braita, kach schirut. If you're renting something, you can rent it with kesef, shtar, chazakah. Well, that's like schirut to my. What are you renting? Right? If you're renting a car or an animal or something that's movable, obviously the halacha is that, and turn the page, daf ayin tet amud bet, metaltalin b'nei shtarininu, question mark. Can you really write a shtar for metaltalin? Metaltalin, shtar only applies to to people, slaves, and karka, right? You can only use a shtar for things that are fixed, like animals, like slaves and land. So, but you can't write a shtar to acquire something that is not fixed. Rav Chisda, you're right. We mean schirut to karka. If I rent out your land, I say I want to rent your building in downtown San Francisco, where I am. I can't lift the building up and pull it. I can acquire it for rental by either paying money, by chazakah, by actually living in it, staying in it, or by writing a shtar. Amar Rebbe Elazar. Now we are on Daf Ayin Tet Amud Bet, and we're getting to a very interesting halacha. Pause to breathe here. We are 3 lines on the top. At the first 2 dots of this long daf, says Rebbe Elazar. Very interesting case. Ra'u shehitmin b'chorshin. You see someone who's a thief who's hiding in the choresh. Choresh is the forest, right? So he's hiding in the wood, in the forest where the trees are. So remember, we said before, and we're going to say it again today, if you steal something in private, you pay kefil, and if you slaughter it, you pay arba v'chamisha, right? If you steal something in open, you're called a gazlan, and you only pay regular, you don't even pay kefil, you don't pay 4 or 5. What about if you steal something in the open, but you're hiding out? So you're hiding, this is how Rashi understands it. You're hiding in the woods next to the field where the animals are grazing, and you hide. And when no one's watching, you go out and you steal an animal. So you did it in public, but you did it in a tricky way, right? You did it with camouflage. The other explanation is that maybe you stole the animal with wood. You put wood around the animal to make sure no one saw that you were taking it. Either way, so you hid the animal in the woods in that case. But you basically are doing it in public, but doing it in a way where you're trying to prevent people from identifying you. And then you were tavachu machar, and then you slaughtered it or sold it. So says Rabbi Elazar, Mishalim Tashlumi Arba v'chamisha, that's a ganav. The fact that you hid who you were, you're a ganav. But when it's implying here that you never actually pulled the animal away. Says Rav Chisda, no. Shekisha b'makel. It didn't just walk to the woods to you because it saw you. It's because you actually hit it with the stick. So hitting with the stick makes it move. And that is called called an action. And since you did it by hiding, so no one would know who you are, you're called a ganav. Amri, so they said, what do you mean? Sure, you were trying to hide, but kivin dera'uhu, since people see you, because you're in public, right? You're stealing it from the middle of the field, gazlanhu. You should be called a gazlan. Says the Gemara, what I just said. Kivan dikam mitamri minayu. Since you're hiding from people, then you're not letting them expose you. Then ganavu. Even so, you are a ganav. And this, of course, comes up. What if you're wearing a ski mask, right? You steal in public, but no one knows who you are. So this implies that since you're making efforts to hide and people can't identify you, you are a ganav, and therefore you pay arba v'chamisha and kefa. Says, well, okay, so if someone sees you, but you're trying to hide, you're a ganav. What's a gazlan? El gazlan hechidami. Rabbi Avo kigon benayo ben Yoda. As the pasuk says in Shmuel, benayo ben Yoda went. Shnamar v'yigzal techanit miyana mitzri. Stole the spear from the mitzri. Went his face. He took his thing from him and he killed him. Yargeo b'chanito, and he killed him with his own spear. But clearly, that's the case. You walk up to someone and you grab their watch, right? Rabbi Yochanan Omer kigon bali shchem. Think about the case earlier in Shoftim, where the Balei Shechem, Shenemar, it says, Vayisimu lo Balei Shechem ma'arvim al Rashi Harim. They set up traps, right, on top of the mountains, meaning traps of people, roadblocks. Vayigzalu it kol asher yavar aleihem b'derech, and they would just stand there, and anyone who came, they would shake them down, and they would steal all their stuff. So that they're right out in the open. They're not walking into your house, they're not hiding. They're walking out and stealing things. So that's Rabbi Yochanan's pshat. Rabbi Avo, my Tamil Amar Mehai. Sounds like a pretty obvious case. You're standing up there as robbers. You're not even a war situation, and you're just stealing. So why didn't he use that case? Amalach, because he'll tell you, Kivan dimitamri itamuri, you know what? They didn't stand in the middle of the road. They stood on the side of the road. So they actually are lav gazlaneinu. They were not actually gazlanim. No, meaning they were not ganavim, right? So they were ganavim. They were in private. They were trying to hide because they wanted to ambush people. Rabbi Yochanan, and the case of Abinayah ben Yoyada, he was face to face. He went straight up to him. And Rabbi Yochanan says, no. That the reason they hid is not because they were embarrassed about stealing. They hid to ambush people, right? Hadikam mitamri. The reason they hid is lo nichzikinu inshe v'na'arkiminayo. So no one would see them and run away, right? So they hid in order to trap people, not because they were embarrassed about stealing. So they had no shame about stealing. And remember, that is the key point, as we're about to hear in a second, about why some people pay kefil when they're a ganav, because they have no shame about stealing. So that is what we're up to. Just want to tell you the place, we're around 15 lines from the top. The word is Sha'alu Talmidav at Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, middle of the line. So the Talmidim, we've had this, Sha'alu Talmidav at Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, the students asked Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, why? Why does a ganav pay kefil when a gazlan only pays one? We all know this from the Rashi. Amar La'en, he said, because look, Zeh heshvek kavod eved lekvod kono. A gazlan hid from, a gazlan, a gazlan hid from the opposite, right? So the gazlan was in public. They knew he was. So he didn't care that he's breaking Hashem's rules and stealing, but he also didn't care that people knew about it. So he treated God as abhorrently as he treated all of the other people. But the Ganav, who did it in private, lo hishvek kvod eved lekvod kono. He did not even compare respect for God, for his kono, for his master, his Lord, to the avadim, the other people. He did it in front of God, as everything is, and he hid himself from people. So he's showing less respect for Hashem. Kaviyachol asa ayin shomata kilo eno roeh. He pretended ayin shomata, of course, is a euphemism for ayin shomala, for God. He made as if God can't see what he's doing. Right, he only had to hide from regular people, not from Hashem. But ozen shomati ilshin shomat, as if God doesn't hear. Shenemar hoy, as the pasuk says, woe in Yeshayo, hamikim me Hashem l'stor eitzah, those who hide from God to give advice, right, as if Hashem doesn't know it. And their actions are done in the dark. So the it says, "Vayomru," and the pasuk continues in Yecheskel, different pasuk. Vayomru, people say, "Lo yireya," God doesn't see what we do. V'lo yavin Elohei Yaakov. Sorry, that's in Tehillim. It says in Yecheskel ki amru, they said, Azav Hashem et haaretz ve'ein Hashem ro'eh. The people said God doesn't care, God has abandoned us and doesn't see. And so all of that perspective is why we punish them more, because they don't even have respect for Hashem. Amar Rabbi Meir, Tanya's in brackets in a parentheses in our Gemara, so we leave it out. But it says Rabbi Meir, Mashlo Mashal Mishum Rabbi Gamliel. I heard, Rabbi Meir says, I heard from my teacher, Rabbi Gamliel, a parable to explain this. Lamad davar domeh, l'shnei b'nei adam shayu be'ir. There are two people who live in a city, Vasu Mishten, they make a great party. They made a big feast. Echad, one of them, Zimenet b'nei ha'ir. He invites all of the people in the city, but lo zimenet b'nei hamelech, but he doesn't invite the ministers, the sons of the king, the royal people. The Echad, and the other one, he doesn't invite anybody. He doesn't invite his friends. He doesn't invite the royal people. He enjoys all the food himself with his family. Who are they going to be more angry at? Certainly the one, not the one who invited nobody. He's just stingy. But the one who invited his friends, the people of the city, but didn't show respect to the rulers. The one who invited people, but excluded others. That's much more insulting than if you exclude everybody. Amar Rabbi Meir. Now says Rabbi Meir, I have another explanation for why you pay 4 or 5, not another, but a different detail. Kamma gadol koach shel melacha. Look how great it is when something is working, when something works. Shor, think about it. If you steal a shor, right, the shor can't do its work. The shor's work is to plow the field. And you can't do that, can't work, so you have to pay extra. Shebitlo min melachto, you caused it not to be able to produce what a shor produces, so chamisha, you got to pay 5 times. But a seh, when you steal a seh, remember the main thing a seh does, sehs do not work in the field, right? A seh gives either children, obviously, but a seh mainly gives wool, right? So a seh, which you didn't stop it from doing its work, so you only pay 4 times. So where my seh, here sorry, no, I skipped. That's the next one. Seh shelo bitlo memlachto arba'ah. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, another explanation, the more famous one, we are 3 lines from the Mishnah. Kamma gadol kavod habriot. Look at how important treating people and the way you show respect and treat someone is. Shar shalach biraglav chamisha. You stole a shar, but it was easy. You got to walk it, so you got to pay more. But a seh, you walked it on, right? You don't lift a shar, you walk it. A seh, which won't come with you, right? But you have to lift it, shekivo ktefo, and that's more menial work and it's harder, and therefore you pay less because the robber actually put in more effort, and so you only pay arba'ah. So even though, of course, in the setting of someone stealing something, and therefore obviously he's not a good person, Hashem, as Rashi puts it, said we should be mekil on his payment because he degraded himself in the act of stealing. Okay, says the Mishnah. Deep breath. Now, this is a very tangentially involved Mishnah, but really the reason we bring it is that we've just been talking about small animals and big animals, a shor and a seh, and so we have a halakha about a shor and a seh. Okay, says the Mishnah, Ein migadlin behima daka be'eretz Yisrael. You're not allowed to raise. We'll see what raise means, but it doesn't mean have one for your private use necessarily. You can't have a farm of small animals, like a seh and a keves, a sheep, and that kind of thing in Eretz Yisrael. We'll see in the Gemara, but it's because they cause damage, they cause havoc in people's fields. They go and they wreck things. They're hard to control. It's not appropriate. Aval migadlin b'Surya, but if you live out in Syria, which are areas that are not main Eretz Yisrael, but were conquered, that's okay. Ube midbarot shel Eretz Yisrael. And the truth is, in Eretz Yisrael, you can have animals, small animals, in places that are deserted, that are midbarot, that are deserts, where there isn't a population. And we'll see in the Gemara what that means. Ein megadlin tarnagolim b'Yerushalayim. Now, specifically in Yerushalayim, you can't raise chickens. Again, not necessarily for your own personal chickens, it's for having a farm of chickens. Because there's kodshim, there's karbanot throughout Yerushalayim. People have their meat sitting out, drying and cooking. You got chickens pecking around, they're going to pick up some meat and walk off with it, and that's very holy stuff. So because there's a lot of kodshim in Yerushalayim, you can't raise chickens. Lo kohanim be'eretz Yisrael, and kohanim can never have chickens anywhere in Eretz Yisrael because they always have truma. And again, the chicken will peck around, pick it up, bring it somewhere tamei, mipnei taharot, because it will remove the tara, it will cause tarot, meaning truma, to become tamei. Continues the Mishnah. This, of course, is super famous. You can never raise pigs anywhere, meaning not only in Eretz Yisrael, but anywhere. And lo yigadel adam et hakelev, a person should not raise a dog, which we will see in tomorrow's daf more, or Sunday's daf now, more about what that means. You got to keep it on a rope, right? You got to keep your dog tied up. Shalshel is literally a chain. Ein parsin yishuvim liyonim. Now you can't spread out traps to capture doves, right, or pigeons, how they translate yonim. Ella, because other people have pigeons in their homes, and they're going to jump into your traps. You're stealing from your neighbors. Unless you are 30 ris away from the nearest populated area, and then you could assume that the pigeons are not going to fly that far. Shloshim ris is the equivalent to, I think, a couple mil. Rashi says 4 mil. So a mil is 2,000 amot, so 8,000 amot, I believe. Says the Gemara, we're at the second of the middle wide lines. Tanur Rabbanan, let's clarify our Mishnah. You cannot raise small animals in Eretz Yisrael, again, because they ruin the fields. But you can raise them. Chorshim we had earlier means the forests, but meaning non-populated areas. So as long as they're not going into people's fields or it's a desert, that's okay. B'Surya, now if you're talking about Surya, which is Jewishly populated but outside of Eretz Yisrael, afilo b'yishuv, you're allowed to raise them even in an area that's populated by houses. And certainly in America you can do that. Tanya, now there's another brighter that says something different. It says, you can't raise them in Eretz Yisrael. You can raise them in the deserts in Yehuda, which we know very much about. You can also raise them in Sfar, means the border, but the deserts near Akko, again, I assume that's referring to north of Akko, which I guess was not populated in those days. Now I think it is pretty populated, but there were, I guess, empty areas there. Even though they said you can't raise behima daka, you can raise behima gasa. You are allowed to have cows. Why? Cows also walk in the field. The reason is the fishein goes ring zera tzibar elam ken rova tzibar yicholin la'amod ba. As everybody knows, you don't make a takana if it's unlivable, and it's impossible to live without a cow, without large animals, because they do the work for you, right? You can't pull your plow yourself. You can't milk, I guess you could deal with, but you need work from large animals. And so it would be untenable to say you can't raise them. Why? Says the Gemara, behema daka. Look, of course you need small animals too, but small animals, 3 lines in the bottom. Nope, not 3 lines in the bottom. 4 lines in the bottom. Behema daka, efshar lahavim yichutz la'aretz. You can bring them, you can import them because they're transferable. You can put them on your wagon. But behema gasa, it would be untenable that every time you need an animal, because they didn't have good transportation, and it's a big thing to bring a cow. Now, just to be clear, even though the Mishnah says that you can't raise small animals in Eretz Yisrael, you can have them before the regal. You can buy them for an event, and you can be mashahu kodem the regal shloshim yom. You can keep them around for 30 days before the regal. Everyone needs, you need a lot of animals, especially Pesach, but certainly every chag you need some animals to slaughter and eat. huge run on animals. You can't just rely on the store. They're going to run out very fast. You got to bring your own. So you're allowed to have them tied up maybe, but you're allowed to have them for 30 days before the regel. And kodem mishteh beno shloshim yom, and if you're making a big feast for your son, a wedding, then you can have them for 30 days. Ubavad shlo yeshet achrona shloshim yom, as long as you don't let them last before more than 30 days. I mean, you can't invest in them 5 weeks before the Chag and say, I'm going to keep it. You can do it only 30 days before the Chag and before the party. Why? The Salkadai to Chamina, 2 lunch on the bottom, to Inafik regel. You might have thought, what does that mean that you can't have more than 30 days? You might have thought, look, let's say you buy it 15 days before the regel, right? The regel is over and you haven't had your 30 days yet. Okay. So maybe mechizavna ad hashta, from the time you bought it till now, the time you've had it in your possession, akati lamalei tlotin yomim. It's not 30 days. You bought it 2 weeks before the Chag. You didn't end up needing it, right? You bought an extra cow or extra sheep. You didn't end up eating it. You might have thought, lo nema, don't say, tlatin mishra shari le l'shuya. I'm allowed to keep it for 30 days. Ella, the fact is, kivan de nafak le regel, once the festival Chag is over and you no longer have an urgent justification for it, you're not allowed to keep it around. You got to sell it or slaughter it. Lo mi boy le l'shuya. You're not allowed to keep it around. The tabach, now continues the Gemara on top of daf ayin. I'm going to go to the 2 dots. But tabach and the butcher, who obviously needs to have animals to be available, he or she is allowed to be lokeach v'shochet. They can buy animals in order to slaughter them, in order to have shchita and sell. Lokeach v'shohen, they could buy and keep them around so they have them available. However, they can't keep them bilvad shlo yishaya ha'aguna sheben shloshim yom. They can't leave even the most, aguna in this case means something very different. It means the one that's left behind, the igun, more than 30 days, that they cannot keep animals for more than 30 days. But just like every person is allowed to buy before the regel and can buy before the wedding for their child or their party up to 30 days and keep it tied up, a butcher needs to have animals and can buy for that purpose as well. And so we will stop there. We are at the 2 dots on the top of Daf Pei Amid Aleph, and we, God willing, will continue live on Sunday. Shabbat Shalom and Shavua Tov, everyone.